On a quiet spring afternoon in 1980, the kind of day when ordinary errands blend into the rhythm of life, a Minnesota woman and her 8-year-old daughter were leaving a beauty salon. The woman, Mary Stauffer, was holding her little girl's hand as they walked across the parking lot toward their car. They were chatting casually, perhaps about dinner plans, perhaps about school, the way mothers and daughters do. To anyone watching, it was an entirely normal moment. But in the shadows, someone else was watching. A man who had been waiting for this chance for years. He had studied, fantasized, and rehearsed this very scene countless times in his mind, and now finally he was ready to make his fantasy real. That man was Ming Sen Shiue. To Mary, he had once been nothing more than a student in her high school math class, one face among many, a boy she likely forgot after the semester ended. To him, she was the center of his world. What began as an adolescent crush had warped over decades into a dangerous obsession. For most of us, high school teachers are remembered fondly, perhaps as mentors or figures of respect. For Shiue, his memory of Mary grew into an all-consuming fixation, and when obsession takes root in a mind unwilling to let go, it can become something monstrous. The story of Mary Stauffer is not just about a kidnapping. It is about the terrifying persistence of obsession, about how a forgotten teenage crush can metastasize into years of surveillance, fantasy, violence, and captivity. And it is also about resilience, the strength of a mother and her child who survived a nightmare and lived to tell the world what unchecked fixation can destroy. Ming Sen Shiue was born in Taiwan in 1950. When he was young, his family emigrated to the United States, settling in Minnesota. Like many immigrant children, he straddled two worlds, the traditions of his home culture and the demands of American life. He was intelligent, even gifted in some areas, but socially isolated. Teachers described him as quiet and distant, classmates as odd and detached. He seemed to drift on the edges of the teenage world, more comfortable in his own thoughts than in the company of peers. But beneath that withdrawn surface, something darker was forming. By the late 1960s, Shiue was a student at Alexander Ramsey High School in Roseville, Minnesota. That was where he encountered Mary Stauffer, a young and dedicated math teacher. For her, teaching was about equations, problem solving, and giving students the tools they needed to succeed. For him, her presence became the axis around which his life began to turn. He later admitted that he developed an immediate, overwhelming crush on her, but it wasn't the normal kind of admiration a student might feel. It was possessive, obsessive, and already tinged with dangerous fantasies. Mary, of course, noticed nothing unusual. She was married to her husband, Irv, and building a life for herself. She was simply doing her job, guiding her students, helping them through algebra and geometry. When Shiue graduated, she assumed he would disappear from her life, as most students did. She forgot him, but Shiue never forgot her. Instead of moving on, he followed her quietly. He tracked her marriage, her moves, her cars, her family life. He found ways to know where she lived and how she spent her time. She had no idea that she was being observed, that her ordinary life was the subject of someone else's secret fantasy world. In his journals, Shiue wrote about her constantly. He imagined scenarios where he abducted her, controlled her, made her live only for him. His teenage crush became the core of his identity, a fixation he refused to release. By the mid-1970s, Mary had children and a steady life. Shiue, by contrast, was slipping deeper into fantasy. He rehearsed her kidnapping in his mind, over and over, refining the details. He even broke into her home at one point, stealing personal items just to feel closer to her. Every boundary of privacy she thought she had was already violated by a man she didn't even remember. On May 16, 1980, his obsession finally erupted into reality. As Mary and her daughter Elizabeth left the beauty salon that day, Shiue approached with a gun. He forced them into his car at gunpoint, binding them quickly. For him, this was the culmination of years of planning. For Mary, it was the beginning of a nightmare. But almost immediately, his carefully rehearsed fantasy collided with the unpredictability of real life. As Shiue prepared to drive away, a 6-year-old boy named Jason Wilkman rode his bicycle past the parking lot. Jason noticed something unusual, a woman and child being forced into a car. Innocent curiosity made him slow down, watching. He saw too much. Shiue panicked. He yanked Jason off his bike and shoved him into the car with Mary and Elizabeth. In an instant, his fantasy had turned into a kidnapping with 3 captives. Shiue drove them to a secluded wooded area. There, he made a chilling decision. He could not risk Jason speaking. He led the boy into the woods, leaving Mary and Elizabeth in the car. Minutes later, he returned alone. Jason Wilkman, only 6 years old, had been murdered. His small body was left in the wilderness. He had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and for that, he paid with his life. For Mary, the horror was indescribable. She knew that she and her daughter were alive only because Shiue still wanted them. The knowledge that a child had just been killed because of his obsession would weigh on her forever. After murdering Jason, Shiue drove Mary and Elizabeth to his home. In the basement, he had built a secret prison, a small cell hidden behind a false wall. For 7.5 weeks, Mary and her daughter were held there. The space was claustrophobic, with just enough room to lie down. There was no window, no way to tell day from night. Shiue would let them out occasionally, forcing Mary to cook or clean, but his control was total. The psychological torment was as constant as the physical captivity. Shiue told Mary that he loved her, that they were meant to be together. He demanded attention, affection, even intimacy. He forced her to listen to his fantasies, to his justifications, to his claims that this was destiny. Mary, trapped, had to calculate every word, every gesture. Too much resistance might trigger violence. Too much compliance might erode her sense of self. To survive, she became a strategist, gauging his moods, playing along when she had to, protecting her daughter at all costs. Elizabeth, incredibly, showed remarkable composure for a child. She followed her mother's cues, staying calm, staying quiet. Mary later said that her daughter's bravery gave her strength, that knowing Elizabeth was watching made her determined never to give up. The weeks stretched on, 7.5 weeks of captivity, 7.5 weeks of walking the razor's edge between survival and despair. Outside, police were searching, but with no leads, hope was fading. Inside, Mary's will to protect her daughter kept her alive. Then finally a chance came. One day when Shiue left the house, Mary managed to reach a telephone. With trembling hands, she dialed for help and whispered their location. It was the moment she had been waiting for, the one risk that could end their nightmare, or end their lives if it failed. Police moved quickly. They surrounded Shiue's house, searched the basement, and found the hidden cell. Mary and Elizabeth were rescued at last. Their ordeal was over. Shiue was arrested on the spot. The charges against him were staggering: kidnapping, assault, murder. At trial, Mary testified in detail about the abduction, the captivity, and Jason Wilkman's murder. She described the cell, the threats, the manipulation. Her testimony revealed the truth of Shiue's obsession. It was never about love. It was about control, domination, and delusion. The court sentenced him to life in prison. He remains incarcerated to this day, still claiming at times that his actions were justified by love, never fully acknowledging the cruelty he inflicted. The story of Mary Stauffer is a chilling reminder of how obsession can twist reality. Most of us leave our high school years behind. Crushes fade, memories soften. But in Shiue's mind, the classroom never ended. He remained frozen in the role of a lovesick teenager, building a fantasy that he eventually forced into reality. Mary's survival, however, is equally powerful. Faced with unimaginable horror, she protected her daughter, endured psychological torment, and emerged alive. Her resilience is as much a part of this story as his cruelty. And then there is Jason Wilkman. His life was cut short simply because he happened to pass by at the wrong moment. His tragedy shows how far the ripples of obsession can spread, touching not only the intended victim, but innocent bystanders. Jason's name deserves to be remembered, not as a footnote, but as a child whose presence that day changed everything. When we look back on this case, we see how thin the line can be between admiration and obsession, between fantasy and delusion. For Mary, that line was crossed by a man she had long forgotten, a former student whose fixation consumed his life and nearly destroyed hers. For the rest of us, her survival is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. You've now heard the story of the Ming Sen Shiue case. But what do you think? Was this purely the result of obsession, or was there something even darker within him? Something beyond fixation, something closer to pure evil? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them all. And if you want more cases like this one, make sure to subscribe to Dark Chronicles Asia, where every week we bring you another true crime story from around the world. Stories that reveal both the darkness humans are capable of and the courage it takes to survive it. Until next time, stay safe.